We'll continue where we left off yesterday. And okay, we'll start off with the K-State School of the Deaf, Norma Volkmer. Good morning, Norma.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Members of the committee, so you should be on page 41 of the memo. About halfway down the page, it should say Kansas State School for the Deaf. Item A is the funding of the implementation of Phase 3 of the Language Assessment Program for fiscal year 2022. The Senate Committee on Education and then this committee agreed to recommend the review of funding the implementation of Phase 3 in the School for the Deaf with additional information from the Children's Cabinet, the State Department of Education, and the School for the Deaf. So this was an enhancement request of about $467,000, all SGF. The governor did not recommend this funding. You see the statute there, KSA 75-5397E, which established the Language Assessment Program. It was to be coordinated by the Kansas Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, or ks.gov, which is in the Department for Children and Families. The purpose of the program is to assess, monitor, and track language milestones for children's ages birth through 8. These language assessments under the statute are to be provided through early intervention services in KDHE or through the school district for children ages 3 and up. The statute also created an advisory committee required that the School for the Deaf, Department of Education, and KDHE enter into interagency agreements with the Commission for Deaf and Hard of Hearing, required an annual report and defined certain terms. Turning the page to page 42, you'll see at the top that this advisory committee actually recommended to the governor and the legislature in 2018 that a 5-year phase-in plan begin. So that would begin with students already being served and kind of expand by age group. They also recommended that the School for the Deaf be designated the lead agency. They recommended a statewide organization structure and the estimated early implementation costs of about $200,000 for the first 2 phases. You'll note that the School for the Deaf did become the lead agency and began to establish and administer the language assessment program. Phase 1 included those children ages 0 to 3 served through the Sound Start program. That was administered in fiscal year 2019. That was about 20 children. And Phase 2 expanded the language assessment program to children ages 3 through 8 and outreach evaluation children who were already being served by the School for the Deaf in 2020. And the School for the Deaf absorbed those first 2 implementation phase costs. Excuse me. So then you can see that, like I said, they requested Phase 3 implementation first in fiscal year 2021, and then this was not funded in the 2020 appropriations bill, and so they requested it again in their fiscal year 2022 budget submission. You can see a breakdown of what would be included in this funding. And then I'll note kind of at the bottom there that since mid-February, representatives of the Children's Cabinet, KDHE, the School for the Deaf, and the Department of Education have been meeting to determine how this program could be funded. A consensus was reached in their meeting on April 23rd, 2021. In this agreement, KDHE will enter into an agreement with the School for the Deaf to provide language assessments for children aged birth through 3, which will cost an estimated $349,000. And for the language assessments for the children ages 3 to 8, the Department of Education will provide a one-time grant funding in fiscal year 2022, totaling about $200,000. This is from existing resources. Department of Education found these savings in decreased travel costs due to COVID-19 pandemic, and this funding will likely not be available in the future. KDHE and KSDE will also work with the School for the Deaf to identify future funding sources for the language assessment program. And they'll all work together to collect and share accurate data. And I will note that you should have received a memo this morning kind of detailing this agreement further and reviewing again the context and history of the language assessment program. And I can stand for any questions on that program.
Did everyone receive that? Senator McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could somebody on the subcommittee talk just a little bit about this and the history and bringing it forward, moving it forward? Like, was there discrepancies and things like that?
Senator Petty.
Well, I do think that probably the resolution that came to here of paying for the ages birth to 3, that should not be any problem, I wouldn't think, long term. But the continued cost over time is probably a continual concern, that 200,000, which will continue to go up going forward. So this legislation, which did pass and didn't have the funding in initially, they said that the School for the Deaf said they could absorb originally in the beginning, but it was potentially going to be laying out there. I think probably one of the issues is that the School for the Deaf wanted to be in control of who's doing the testing. They want it to be their staff. They didn't want it to be staff that dealt with other groups, not just with the deaf. And so I think they felt that they had more of a consistent review if they had their internal staff of their own taking care of this. I do think the resolution they've come up with for this year is a good one, and it, just as it says, we will have to, I myself hadn't seen that memo either, so that's come out. But it will be something we will have to be addressing in the future when it comes to funding. Senator Erickson, you might have something to add on that.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, I think that Senator Petty did a good job of describing the thought process behind who's doing the testing for the LAP and the way that it came out of that subcommittee.
Senator McGinn, do you have any other questions?
So all the salary and positions and everything has to do with just the testing?
Well, yes. I mean, they do want to have more staff. That there is the cost of the staff that would have to be doing this statewide and not just being done through special ed staff in the various parts of the state. So that is, you know, it definitely is an issue that they feel like their internal staff does a better job of assessing the needs of the deaf and their progression than someone else would. So yes, there is this, I mean, that would be a cost that they have with their staff, and then that does continually to continue to be a cost long-term for this program to be implemented over time.
So, Senator Erickson or Senator Petty, do either one of you know, I mean, how's this been handled up to now? I mean, who's been doing this assessment, or how's it been handled till this legislation?
Well, that's part of the issue, that this type of assessment hasn't been done. And so, you know, families have choices about how they want their child's educational needs dealt with, whether they're continue to stay in their own community or whether they go to the School for the Deaf. And one of the issues they brought forward is the fact that children, deaf children have low graduation rate, and that they feel that this long-term assessment following will help to improve their educational aspirations and their abilities and moving forward. So yes, it's new. That's why the legislation was passed in 2020.
Other questions? Senator Fagg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you tell me how many children are in this school?
Mr. Chairman, sir, are you referring to the School for the Deaf?
School of Deaf.
1 second.
And then the other question I have while you're looking at, how many deaf children have been identified in Kansas? I'd find that kind of number interesting. And then I'd be interested in, because I think if I remember in our budgets, that was $11 million budget. How much of that was administrative costs is what I would find interesting in that number. Maybe you won't have that, but that's my questions.
She's looking.
Senator McGinn?
So the bill created this 16-member advisory committee, and then they did meet, and then they came up with these recommendations? I don't know.
Norma, do you know on that one?
Yes, so the statute actually has this being a school, the KDHE and school districts doing the assessments, and then the advisory committee in their report in 2018 recommended that instead the School for the Deaf, because of their expertise with deaf and hard of hearing children, instead administer the program. And so at that point, the School for the Deaf began administering the program, and they were able to absorb the cost for the first 2 phases. But phase 3 would expand the population being assessed and served, and so they would need additional expenses for that.
Senator Hawk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question for either of the senators. I'm looking at what Ways and Means decision is. It looks to me like we don't really have to decide anything. I want to see if I'm accurate in my assessment, because they've come up with internal funding because of decreased travel costs to fund the $200,000, which is to move forward. But what we haven't funded is phase 3. Is that accurate? And if we were to fund phase 3, we would need to add another $466,000. Is that the decision point we're at?
I believe that's accurate, yes.
So it looks like from the paragraph at the bottom of page 42, we could actually do nothing and the program would move forward for another year, and we could make that decision next year. Is that an accurate? Okay.
I would agree, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the number of students enrolled at the School for the Deaf was approximately 148 for school year 2020, and approximately 158 for the school year 2021. And I will note, so the children currently being served in phase 1 and phase 2 are those already being served in Sound Start, School for the Deaf children ages 3 to 8, and outreach evaluation children being served by the School for the Deaf ages 3 to 8. Phase 3 would expand this to all deaf and hard of hearing birth age to 3.
Did you have the budget amount? I think that was one of the questions that Senator Fagg asked.
Oh, apologies.
No.
I believe it was about 11 million, and I do not have the number of deaf children in the state.
Okay. You get that?
I can follow up on that. Yep.
Okay.
Senator McGinn?
So I'd be a little bit interested. The governor did not recommend this funding. So back to what Senator Hawk said, you could wait and then deal with it early next year if it's a issue in a reconciliation bill.
Is the committee okay with looking at this later date? Everybody okay with that? Senator McGinn?
I'm kind of curious, so I just want to make sure I understand. These individuals would also do testing across the state, so not all, children with deaf issues are going to this school. And it'd really be nice to know how many are going somewhere else across the state. And these people, those 4 FTEs, they'll be the ones that would go across the state and help them with assessment?
Mr. Chair, that's correct. So this program is for assessing, specialists to assess and then provide a game plan, as it were. Not all deaf and hard of hearing children attend the School for the Deaf, and they do provide services to school districts. So if a child is simply hard of hearing, they can, of course, the school district can rent equipment from the School for the Deaf, and the child can attend their at-home school district, as it were. So yeah, the School for the Deaf does not serve the entirety of the deaf and hard of hearing population of Kansas. It's a choice to send their child there. They do some kind of short programs as well. And so the purpose is, by and large, to incorporate them back into their school district, their home school district. It's just the need of the child themselves.
Okay, so to be clear, is this just the birth to 3, this extra money, or is this to include birth to 3 and do assessments for everybody outside that age?
So my understanding of phase 3 is it would just then encompass the birth to age 3, because that's the origin of phase 3. Granted, that was the estimated children to be served when the School for the Deaf was asking for state general fund monies. Whether or not they can incorporate the Department of Education funding like that, I don't know. I'd have to get more information from the agency. I will note that the House K-12 Budget Committee and then the House Appropriations, also in HB 2119, required the Department of Education to fund phase 3 implementation for the School for the Deaf. So in that case, they were also seeking an agency that was originally statutorily incorporated into this program to fund the program rather than use state general fund monies. So I'll just note that.
So if the committee's comfortable with looking at this next year or see what happens in conference, okay, we'll do that. Senator Petty?
I think that's a good point that's been brought up. Because I do have questions, continue to have questions about whether birth through 3 can't be funded through the IDEA as is suggested for next year. Now, there is that past birth through 3 under the Part C, but I do think it would be good for the School of the Deaf to bring back more information to the Education Committee.
Okay, committee, we'll just look at that again next year. Norma, if you want to move on, please.
Certainly, so we should be at the bottom of page 42 with the Department of Education. The first item is HB 2039. This was vetoed by the governor on April 22nd, 2021. And this is the Civics and Financial Literacy Bill. So if you turn to page 43, you see an outline of what the bill would have done. Would have made passage of a civics test or a series of tests totaling 60 questions drawn from the naturalization test administered by the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services as a graduation requirement for students enrolled at an accredited public, private, and parochial high school beginning in school year 2023. Down into the second paragraph, it would have also amended law regarding personal financial literacy education curriculum and made passage of a personal financial literacy course a graduation requirement for all students enrolled in an accredited public, private, and parochial high school beginning in school year 2025. And you'll note there that the state board would have been required to develop the curriculum standards and create a course of instruction for students grade 10 through 12. Topics included would have included savings and investing, credit and debt topics, financial responsibility, insurance, risk management, and income topics. Down at the bottom of the page, you'll see that the bill would have required net expenditures of approximately $470,000. Per the fiscal note for HB 2039 as introduced, it would have had a fiscal impact of about $400,000, which is an estimated cost of $10 per test, an administration of 40,000 tests to an estimated 37,700 students. HB 2031, and then turning to page 44, was the financial literacy bill as introduced, and it would have had a fiscal impact of about $70,000. Those costs were associated with, of course, the development of curriculum materials and in-person meeting reimbursement and travel costs. And I will pause there for questions on item A.
Questions? Seeing none, please proceed.
All right, item B is the Department of Education budget. You'll see fiscal year 2021, the governor recommended revised expenditures of $5.7 billion, including $3.9 billion SGF. This is an all funds increase of $3.6 million or 0.1%, and an SGF decrease of $30.1 million or 0.8% from the agency's revised estimate. These changes are primarily attributable to the allocation of $41.6 million from the Federal Coronavirus Relief Fund by the Spark Task Force to the Children's Cabinet. I will note approximately $23.5 million of that was recouped. That was still counted in the budget because of the cutoff date for that recoupment. And it's also partially offset by the governor's recommendation to adopt the fall 2020 education consensus estimates and deletion of reappropriated funds. So the consensus estimates are the big portion of the SGF decrease. The Senate committee concurred with the governor's recommendation and deleted language added by the Senate Committee on Education regarding the funding of two dyslexia positions, and that was to be reviewed at omnibus. And I will get into detail on that after we go through the whole budget. And I'll note that the House committee recommended deleting provisions and inserting them into sub for HB 2119, which was the large K-12 education budget bill. And then the Conference Committee did agree with the House Committee and deleted those provisions and inserted them into SB 175. I'll note SB 170, the Conference Committee report for SB 175 was not adopted by both chambers. Moving to fiscal year 2022, the governor recommended $5.8 billion, including $4.2 billion SGF. This is an all funds decrease of about $57.6 million or 1%, and an SGF decrease of about $45.4 million or 1.1% below the agency's request. This is primarily attributable to the recommendation to adopt the fall 2020 education consensus estimates and the governor not recommending the agency's enhancement requests. The Senate committee recommended $5.8 billion, including $4.0 billion SGF for fiscal year 2022. And turning to page 45, you'll see the major adjustments. That included $148,000 for local option budget state aid and language for USD 499 Galena. The deletion of approximately $183.2 million and addition of $183.2 million from other funds for state foundation aid and LOB state aid. The deletion of $52.8 million SGF, an addition of $52.8 million from other funds, and deletion of language extending the heightened state at-risk weighting. And then the deletion of $250,000 all SGF for dyslexia positions and implementation grants added by the Senate Committee on Education. I will go into detail on all of these items again after going through the whole budget. The House Committee concurred with the governor's recommendation with 3 changes. The addition of $300,000 all SGF for the Beloit Juvenile Transitional Crisis Center pilot program, which Merle spoke to yesterday. The deletion of $5.8 billion, including $4.2 billion SGF, to reflect the deletion of the budget and insertion into sub for HB 2119. And the addition of language creating a statewide program in the Children's Cabinet to cooperate with the Dolly Parton Imagination Library Fund, library for the purpose of providing books for all children in Kansas ages 0 to 5. At the bottom of 45, you'll see the conference committee. The conference committee did agree with the Senate committee and added the funding and language for the USD 499 Galena. They concurred with the House committee and added the funding and language for the Beloit Juvenile Transitional Crisis Program. They agreed with the House committee and deleted the budget and inserted it into SB 175. And turning to page 46, they added the Dolly Parton Imagination Library Fund and language. And again, I'll note that the conference committee report for SB 175 was not adopted by both chambers of the legislature. Finally, turning to page 46 still, we're on fiscal year 2023. The governor recommended expenditures of $3.1 billion, all SGF for fiscal year 2023, including $2.5 billion for the SGF portion of the state foundation aid, and approximately $534.1 million for supplemental state aid, which is that LOB state aid. The Senate committee recommended expenditures of $3.1 billion, including $2.7 billion SGF, with the following adjustments. There was the addition of $90,000 all SGF for LOB state aid and the language for Galena. The deletion of $280.3 million SGF, an addition of $280.3 million from other funds for state foundation aid and local option budget state aid. And then the deletion of the high density at-risk weighting and the $52.8 million SGF, an addition of $52.8 million from other funds to be reviewed at omnibus. And again, I'll go into further detail after going through the budget. The House committee, again, recommended the deletion of the budget and insertion into sub for HB 2119. And then also added the language for the Dolly Parton Imagination Library Fund for 2023. Turning to page 47 at the top, you can see the conference committee action. Again, conference committee concurred with the Senate committee and added the money and language for Galena. Concurred with the House committee and deleted the budget and inserted it into SB 175, and concurred with the House committee and added the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. And once again, the conference committee report for SB 175 was not adopted by both chambers. I can stand for questions on the budget there, or if you'd like, I can go into detail on what was included in sub for HB 2119/SB 175.
Let's see if there was any questions. Senator McGinn.
On the Senate committee or action on top of page 45, can either the education subcommittee share this? I don't remember if it was a floor amendment. Why are we doing the $148,000 for Galena to calculate the LOB? We've had provisions in the past where we give people flexibility on that averaging or look back. I just want to understand why this is in the budget, because I thought we already built in flexibility.
Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I inserted this on behalf of a senator from that area. What happened is they have a hospital that's coming off the tax rolls that I think was somewhere near a third of their property tax base for the calculation. So what this did by doing this 148, and then in the next year, I think it's somewhere roughly around the $90,000 mark, it smoothed that drop for them. Otherwise, they would have had a pretty significant drop even with the 3-year look back.
Thank you.
So that's all that did. It wasn't a huge sum of money, so we just thought we would make that a little less painful for them in a single year. Usually that 3-year really works well, but there aren't a lot of scenarios where we have something so massive come off the tax rolls like they experienced there in Galena.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Seeing none, please proceed.
All right, and would you like me to go through the HB 2119 or go ahead and go to the next item?
Does anyone want to go through 2119, or should we just move on? You might briefly, I mean, might as well.
Sure.
In case we miss something.
So on page 47, so the House Committee on K-12 Education Budget inserted the governor's budget recommendation into sub for HB 2119, which among other things would have also created the Student Empowerment Act and would have amended the Kansas School Equity and Enhancement Act to extend the high-density at-risk weighting through fiscal year 2022, as well as making a few other changes. Budget adjustments included in that was the recommendation that school districts provide $500 additional compensation from federal COVID-19 relief legislation to teachers in fiscal year 2021. Language directing the Department of Education expend $5 million from federal COVID-19 relief packages for safety and security grants, if possible, as well as $3.9 million for the mental health intervention team pilot program, and $100,000 for communities and schools. Again, as I noted earlier, adding language directing the Department of Education to expend monies for the language assessment program phase 3 implementation. That language would have directed them to use funds received under federal COVID-19 relief legislation if allowable, or from existing resources. There was language allowing the Department of Education to distribute money from the local school district contribution checkoff fund to all school districts. There was a request by the agency. Turning to page 48, there was a deletion of the language extending the high-density at-risk weighting through fiscal year 2023. And there was the reauthorization of the 20 mil property tax levy for fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2023, as well as the continuation of the exemption of the residential property. I will note, when this was taken out of conference committee in SB 175, the reauthorization of the 20 mil was removed from the bill. And again, SB 175 conference committee report was not adopted by both chambers. Moving on to item C. This is dyslexia positions and grants proposed by the...
Senator McGinn.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to pause there. Looking at this mental health intervention pilot program, I don't know anything about that. Maybe it went through some of the Senate committees. Maybe it went through Senate Health. Maybe our education subcommittee reviewed that. But I generally follow mental health issues pretty closely. I was just curious if, I don't even know what it looks like in the details. Did it go through any Senate committees?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, so the Mental Health Intervention Team Pilot Program is funded by the Department of Education. It's included in their budget. They are budgeted for fiscal year 22 to receive approximately $7.5 million all SGF. So the Senate Committee on Education could certainly have either added or decreased that funding. They did not make a recommendation on the Mental Health Intervention Team Pilot Program. It is currently funded in the Department of Education budget for 21-22.
Is it the pilot program that we've had previously at certain, only 6 schools across the state? It's the same program, and it's in its 4th year, and it's still called a pilot?
It is. I think that's just how it's called. We can call it the Mental Health Intervention Team Program. It has been expanded to, I believe, 56 districts is the estimate for 2022.
Senator Erickson, did you have anything to do with that in Education Committee?
We did take a look at it, and Norma is right. It is still called, quote, a pilot program, but it has expanded past the 6 districts to, I forget how many Norma said, but yes, it is the same program that was started a couple years ago and just keeps expanding bit by bit.
I just wish someday we could run a bill across the floor so that, and my amendment will be to take the word pilot out. Thank you.
Other questions? Please proceed, Norma.
I'll make note of that for next year. I'll just call it program. And it is 56 school districts in 2021 is how many they served. So moving on to page 48, item C. So the Senate Committee on Education had added state dyslexia positions and grants in fiscal year language in fiscal year 2021 and funding and language in fiscal year 2022. This committee did not recommend those adjustments and requested these items be reviewed at omnibus. The agency had requested about $97,000 all SGF and 1.0 FTE positions to fund the salary and operating expenditures for the creation of a state dyslexia coordinator. This had been recommended by the Legislative Task Force on Dyslexia, basically to coordinate and implement statewide dyslexia and early learning initiatives. The governor did not fund the position So for fiscal year 2021, the Senate Committee on Education had added language directing the Department of Education to fund the Center for Reading Project Manager grant position and an interim dyslexia coordinator or consultant position from within existing resources. So the interim coordinator and consultant position, you can see, would kind of serve as the hiring committee chair and oversee the work of the project manager. And the role of the project manager would be to assist in the development and support of the science of reading curricula, which is the recommended curricula for dyslexia. For fiscal year 2022, the Senate Committee on Education added $250,000, all SGF, for those two positions, as well as $100,000 for the statewide dyslexia coordinator position. And then it was $80,000 for the Center for Reading Project Manager, $40,000 for the interim dyslexia coordinator / consultant, and then $30,000 for implementation grants, which were to be awarded to KBOR institutions and not-for-profit colleges who transitioned to science of reading instruction by fall 2022. Turning to page 49 at the top there, that funding would be then reviewed by KBOR and approved by the dyslexia coordinator or the interim dyslexia coordinator. And I'll go a note that this committee just chose not to add that funding, and I can pause there for that.
Questions? Seeing none, please proceed.
All right, moving on to item D. As discussed earlier, this committee requested the review of the addition of the $149,000 in fiscal year, $148,000 for fiscal year 2022 and $90,000 for fiscal year 2023 in the language allowing USD 499 Galena to calculate LOB using the current year calculation rather than the 3-year average. And I will note again that this was added by the conference committee into HB 2007, and it was not vetoed by the governor. So I can pause there on that, or I can move on to item E.
Any questions on that? Senator Petty?
I do think that this is not good policy. And we're moving away from something that we have in school finance to calculate for school districts to use a three years average to calculate. And this now puts us back into this pool of, every legislator would just make a decision for what they think is best for their district. I think that we, don't help ourselves when we do this kind of stuff.
I think he was gone when it was explained why we did this.
Excuse me?
I said, I think he was out, I think you had stepped out of the committee when this was explained as to why we did.
Galena?
Galena, yes.
Oh, sorry. Well,
No,
I'll just, my opinion's still the same, so.
If you want a little more detail, I can have Senator Clay's.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, please proceed.
All right, moving on to item E. This was to consider the deletion of state general funds in addition of other funds for state foundation aid and LOB state aid. This committee requested the review of the deletion of SGF and replacement with other funds. There's a deletion of $183.2 million, all SGF, for state foundation aid and LOB state aid to be replaced for fiscal year 2022. And in fiscal year 2023, the deletion and then replacement with other funds of $280.3 million for state foundation aid and LOB state aid. And this was upon review of federal COVID-19 relief legislation to replace SGF. I'll note that Kansas received approximately $1.3 billion to KSD in school districts under the Federal CARES Act, CRISA, and the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. Of that, approximately $1.2 million was directed to go to school districts. As of April 8th, 2021, the school districts have been awarded $84.1 million. That's all the funding received under the CARES Act only, and expended $57.3 million. School districts also expended approximately $74.0 million from CARES Act CRF monies that was allocated to counties. I will note that federal funds received under federal COVID-19 relief legislation are limited to specific uses and also require that the state maintain certain expenditure levels. So there is a maintenance of effort requirement. And there is a maintenance of equity requirement, which bars decreases that disproportionately affect high poverty and high need school districts on a per pupil basis. And so that maintenance of equity applies to fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2023. There is a maintenance of effort requirement for fiscal years 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. And I do go into further detail on both the funding received and expended, as well as the maintenance of effort and maintenance of equity requirement in that Ivory memo that was passed out yesterday. I can review that if you'd like. And then I will also note that the green ledger-size paper includes all of the funding that has been allocated to school districts, and what has been expended to them. And this is through April. And I will note that the school districts in purple on the green ledger have expended all of their CARES Act funding. So to start spending money under KRISA or ARPA, which has not been awarded to the school districts, it's only been received by the state. Once it has been awarded, the school district first has to expend all of their CARES Act money. So you have to go in order of the federal COVID-19 relief legislation. You can't skip right to your ARPA money. So I can pause for any questions on that. And like I said, I can briefly review the memo and the green ledger size paper if you would like.
Are there questions? Senator Petty?
So Nora, I know you touched on maintenance of effort, and I know that in the cream colored or beigey color paper that we received, the last 2 pages of 9 and 10, you go extensively into the maintenance of effort. And so could you just expand again about what that means for us as a state when it comes to being able to, and these funds for school districts are going directly to this, have been allocated through Title I funding levels to the districts. That's how the calculation occurs. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so, and there are specific guidelines that the State Board of Education is implementing specifically for those school districts to be able to expend those funds, as you just said, in the order that they have been received. But when it comes to the maintenance of effort, that could you go in a little more into detail about the maintenance of effort in order that we don't have to pay back federal funds?
Certainly, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. As the Senator noted on page 9, which is the last couple pages of that memo, I go into detail on the maintenance of effort. So the maintenance of effort, there are several funds in all 3 of the major COVID relief packages that are subject to the maintenance of effort. In the CARES Act, it is the ESSER fund, so that's what's going to the school districts and the Department of Education. The GEAR fund, so that went primarily to higher education in Kansas. And then under KRISA, you have, again, the ESSER fund, again, the GEAR fund, which was actually split into 2 portions. So it was GEAR funding that went to higher education, and then that included the EANS money, which is the emergency assistance to non-public schools. So that is also subject to the maintenance of effort. And then under ARPA, the only fund subject to maintenance of effort is the ESSER fund. So it's only the school district funding, which is that $830 million that they're approximately receiving. For the maintenance of effort, the CARES Act maintenance of effort requires an continuation of the level of funding for the average level of fiscal years 2017 through fiscal years 2019. So the average level spent on elementary and secondary education, and then the average level spent on post-secondary higher education has to be maintained for fiscal years 2020 and fiscal years 2021. Under KRISA and the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, this maintenance effort was changed slightly. So the maintenance of effort for fiscal years 2022 and fiscal years 2023 is that the state must maintain the average level of the proportion to the overall state budget for elementary and secondary education and post-secondary education. So this means rather than maintaining a dollar level, you must take the average of the same 3 fiscal years, so fiscal year 2017, 2018, and 2019. the average level spent on K-12 education as compared to the overall state budget for those same 3 fiscal years. And then you do the same for higher education. So you must maintain that proportion in fiscal years 2022 and fiscal years 2023. So essentially the percent of the budget that you have for K-12 and higher ed over the average of fiscal years 2017 through 2019, that percentage must be met for fiscal years 2022 and fiscal years 2023 for you to meet maintenance of effort requirements. It is 2 separate tests, but both tests have to be met. I will note that the Secretary of Education does have a waiver. So states may request a waiver for any of the fiscal years, so fiscal years 2020 through 2023, which are the 4 years subject to a maintenance of effort. And they have set guidelines on what can and cannot be included in your calculation of both each of the K-12 and higher ed's MOE, and then of course your overall state budget. And then there is the maintenance of equity, which is targeted at the spending of high need and high poverty school districts. We're still awaiting further guidance on what all this requires because it includes Department of Commerce data at the federal level. But our understanding so far is that essentially no reductions can be made that would target or disproportionately impact those districts that would meet the high need and high poverty definitions. We're still, like I said, waiting on guidance on what that would be.
Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate that explanation. I'm trying to get my head around it. To further clarify, it looks like most of the money that is going out to the school districts is going out directly to the school districts, or is it going in lump sum to the State Department of Education and then to the school districts?
Certainly. So, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, under all 3 COVID relief packages, the funding is awarded to the state, and then the state must award at least 90% to school districts based on the Title I formula. So in the CARES Act, this was approximately $76.1 million. Under CRISA, it's approximately $332 million. And under ARPA, it would be approximately $747 million. And then the remainder is, of course, left up to the state for discretionary grants for state emergency needs. But it is all received by the Department of Education. It's awarded to the school districts, and then it is drawn down and dispersed on a monthly basis at the request of the school district. So after it's been awarded, they have then 12 months to expend those funds.
And I think the key point you made is on a Title I formula predominantly.
So that's correct. It is all based on the Title I formula.
And so our school finance formula that we allocate money from the state is not the Title I formula that in terms of the state general fund allocation.
That's correct.
So trying to reconcile those two things with what we had hoped to do when we first did our initial Senate budget in terms of looking at essentially these federal dollars to supplant our state effort. It sounds to me in a complex way, you're saying and the State Department of Education is saying that can't be done.
I can't speak to that policy decision. I know that there is a maintenance of effort requirement, so the state has to hit a certain proportion of the budget, which is somewhat difficult to calculate when you don't have a finalized budget and it's based on actual expenditures. So the reality is we won't really know the exact maintenance of effort percentage until we're closer to actual expenditures spent by the state, which won't occur until May of next year. And then for the maintenance of equity requirement, like I said, we're still waiting on guidance from the federal government outside of seeing the language in the American Rescue Plan Act. We haven't received any kind of further guidance on what anything means. They've defined high-need school districts as those school districts that serve a higher percentage of low-income students and have 50% of the state's enrollment. High poverty is, again, the highest ranked for low-income students and serving the top 20% of the state's enrollment. But who qualifies for the low income may or may not be the same definition as Kansas's definition of at-risk. So we're still waiting on federal guidance for that. But that is, again, that you simply can't cut those school districts at a higher rate than other school districts. So hypothetically, you could decrease funding to all school districts at the same per pupil basis level and still meet the maintenance of equity requirements. Again, we're still waiting on further guidance.
Senator Petty.
Thank you.
I want to challenge what you just said, because is it correct, we can't go below the maintenance of at least 2017, so through 2019? We know what we've spent, our expenditures were for 2017, 2018, and 2019.
So that's correct. So we have a guideline percentage that Kansas would have to meet, but because it's comparing the K-12 and higher education expenditures for 2022 to the overall 2022 state budget, and we're only allowed to make that basis on actual expenditures until we have actual expenditures for the entirety of all state agencies and then the K-12 and higher ed. We can say what the goal is for maintenance of effort, but until we have a better understanding of what actual expenditures are, we can't say whether or not we're hitting that goal. So you're correct, Senator, we do have an understanding of what percentage we need to hit. It's just ensuring that the actual expenditures hit that percentage. We can't predict until we're closer to, well, actual expenditures.
And just as a follow-up on that, when it comes to the maintenance of equity, and am I understanding correctly that is the maintenance of equity new under the American Rescue Act?
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, so yeah, so it was added by the American Rescue Plan Act. ARPA made several changes to the COVID-19 funding for schools. It required certain percentages to be spent on learning loss. It set requirements for the state discretionary funding and extended maintenance of effort to 2023. And then, yes, it instituted a maintenance of equity, which is new and which is why we're kind of waiting on guidance to fully understand what it means. But our understanding at this time is that the goal is to prevent disproportionate cuts to high need and high poverty school districts. What school districts that would be in Kansas, until we get further guidance on that definition, we can't say.
Just a further follow-up on that. I mean, there is some detail here in what you've provided us, so it really causes I think, great concern when you talk about deletion of high-density at-risk weighting. It's something we already have been funding, and if this maintenance of equity, if we just with the language you've provided for us, maintain for support for high poverty local educational agencies at the 2019 level per pupil, we do have high density at-risk weighting in our calculation of our school finance currently, correct?
That's correct.
And that is directed specifically to those school districts that have high poverty.
So that's correct. And yes, so that's on item F, was the deletion of the high density at-risk weighting in both 2022 and 2023 in replacement with other funds. Again, I'll just note that while the assumption is yes, high need and high poverty school districts are probably similar to those which would be receiving the high density at-risk weighting in Kansas, until we get further guidance, because it's using Federal Department of Commerce data, and we don't know what data that is. What school districts are under the maintenance of equity, we can't say with anything near 100% certainty. So the presumption may be that yes, those school districts receiving high density at-risk weighting, were they to lose that funding, it would cause a maintenance of equity issue. Yes, again though, only if that was the only funding deleted. So again, it's just that, it's not that their funding cannot be reduced at all, it's only that their funding cannot be reduced at a higher rate than other local educational agencies, which in the state of Kansas, school districts.
And May 11th is that date, right, when you believe you'll get more language or get the complete language?
I don't have a date on the guidance. Our understanding is it will be issued soon. They just updated the maintenance of efforts guidance last week. So how promptly soon is, I don't know.
Other questions for Norma? Senator Solentrum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so that I more clearly understand the facts and figures here on these programs, which is the Rescue Act, along with the other numerous ones. I think it's in column 4th to the left. And of course, we got our counties and our district number, and then we got our estimated student population for 21. Am I figuring this correctly? If you divide 259, 44,000 students into 275 million, that's $6,250, $6,250 in one school year. If you go to 267, that has 1,757 students into 1,466,000, that's $830. It's that much discrepancy between school districts?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. So there is, I believe the average received under CRISA was $743, and that ranged from anything from $66 to, I believe, upwards of $2,000 per FTE was the average. Because it is based on Title I, which is primarily based on low-income students, it is targeted at those school districts that have a disproportionately high amount of low-income students. I will note in the memo on page 7, under the American Rescue Plan Act, and they did this under CRISA as well, the state board has approved tentative expenditures that would, this Department of Education is referring to it as true up some school districts. So under CRISA, it would increase expenditures or increase the funding received under CRISA for approximately 21 school districts. The state would expend $11.5 million from the discretionary fund to ensure that those 21 school districts, which receive the lowest amount of funding under the CRISA money, would receive at least 300 per FTE. So they're referring to it as truing it up. Under the American Rescue Plan Act, the state board has approved approximately $18.4 million for the same plan. And so that would ensure that all school districts received approximately 600 per FTE. So the goal of those two plans is, of course, to then, yes, increase those school districts that perhaps have the same COVID expenditures, but because they have a small low-income student population, did not receive the same level of funding because of the use of the Title I formula as other school districts.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
So irregardless of your explanation, my calculations are correct. Is that correct?
I'd have to pull out a calculator. I'm not that quick at math, but yes,
reason I
there's
ask-
a wide gap.
I'm sorry. The reason I ask is because 267 had in-student education all year long and still does today. 259 has barely had them in class at all year. And so our schools that are trying to adhere to the best outcome for our students and have them in class teaching them every day are significantly getting penalized. And I understand you're not the person developing the program or anything of that nature. It's just, to me, extremely, extremely unfair. Thank you.
Other questions? You none?
Mr. Chairman, the last item was the deletion of the high density at risk. I can review that very briefly, or it was kind of already touched on.
If you don't mind, go ahead.
Sure. So this committee requested the review of the deletion of 52.8 million SGF and addition of 52.8 million other funds. And that's an estimate for extending the high-density at-risk weighting through fiscal year 2022 and 2023. I will note that the 2020 appropriations bill, so SB 66, did extend the high-density at-risk weighting through fiscal year 2022. And so this committee requested the review of this item to determine if federal funds could be used to replace the SGF. And again, the conference committee on HB 2007 did not include this funding adjustment or the deletion of the language. And so the maintenance of equity is what likely would come into play here. Again, though, the maintenance of equity just requires that the state maintain funding. Any reductions are not targeted at those that have the highest low-income student population. Not that that there can be no reduction of funding to school districts, just that it can't disproportionately impact those that have low-income population.
Any questions on that? Senator Petty.
So, Mr. Chairman, where are we at here? What are we talking about taking a position, or, I mean, you're going to be going back to the table in omnibus, and we have no education money in our budget.
I think we're going to look at this next week when we get here.
Is that called kicking the football down the road? That's what I heard before we adjourned, and now we're going into the veto session, hearing the same thing. I think we have a lot of information. Norma did a great job here, but, and, you know, we can talk all about what we want to do with federal dollars, but the reality is the federal dollar, the legislation was passed by Congress, and it came with specific guidelines from Congress. We're willing to take the money, and there are a lot of hoops that our school districts who have been doing the best they can to provide the best education for all children, whether it was virtual or in person, and making decisions every day to do that. I think just like talking about how hard our state employees have worked, our educational population across the state has worked extremely hard to provide a quality education for students under the circumstances that we all were dealt with this year with COVID-19. So we have this laying in front of us, and so you're saying that we're not going to do anything with school finance funding for until next week?
Correct.
So,
Senator McGinn.
I mean, we're just leaving this on the table, so we're not supporting or not supporting this.
Right. We will have a meeting next week. Any other questions? Thank you, Norma. Was there any more questions for Norma? I was just trying to find my place.
Yesterday,
Do you have a question?
I had asked, and I can't find what page, but it has to do with bids.
Question for Norma?
Not for Norma.
Okay.
It's bids.
Thank you, Norma.
Martin, I don't know if Martin's in here, in the other room or not.
Is Martin in the other room or on WebEx? Yes. Yes, he is. Morning, Martin.
Good morning, committee.
Martin, what page am I looking for?
Bids begins on page 14.
So the only concern I have is they're really having a hard time getting assigned counsel. And for years, they did not ask for money, and it's just gotten worse and worse. And I know that House Bill 2362, we passed out of this committee, and it's below the line. And I don't know if we're going to go on GO or not. So I guess just to put this in conference, to keep discussing it, I would like to go back to increasing that hourly rate to the $100 per hour.
And you're on page 15, item B?
On page 15, second paragraph.
Right.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to do that.
We have a motion by Senator McGinn, a second by Senator Solentrum. I believe we did discuss this, and
So if we have a bill out there, and if the bill passes, we're good. But if it doesn't, if we don't go on GO, then we've ended the conversation, and this will continue that conversation.
right, okay.
Okay?
And do you remember what the House or the Senate? It was a Senate bill, wasn't it?
I know we worked it, and we put the 100, and I think we even went to 120 in 2023. But all this will do is just take it to the 100.
Right. So, Martin, as long as we just want to put the language in there that if the bill doesn't pass, that we go to 100.
Correct. So that is the proviso that was presented at omnibus that the committee agreed to review now, which is item B. The bill that you're referring to is 2363. And that did increase, that bill did pass out of this committee with a technical amendment sitting below the line that would increase the assigned counsel pay up to $100 through FY23, beginning 24, go up to $120 an hour. So this proviso would ensure up to $100 through FY 2022. If that bill does pass, that bill will override the proviso.
Okay.
Right.
Any other questions on this or discussion?
And if the proviso passes, we still have to deal with it next year. We still have to deal with the bill. This just gets us there.
To make sure that it doesn't fall through for a year.
Exactly. Thank you.
So everyone's okay with that? We have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, the other thing, thank you, Martin. I'd like to discuss the pay raises. We've postponed all them and at least get the discussion started today on the salary increases. I know yesterday there was a mention that I'm not sure that we're going to, what the support is as far as raises and the amount of raises. So I think we need to maybe just have a discussion on that today. I don't want to finish this up today because I know there's a couple of unanswered things that are going on right now that we will also look at this next week when we come back. So are there particular questions on the budget? Senator McGinn.
Thank you. I know this discussion started yesterday, and we just kind of shut it down, and that was fine. But I don't think another point of view was made. We went through a very challenging time in the state where our state employees, they were on track to get their salaries at least whoa, this thing is going all over the place. Didn't think I was on, and now I'm on. If nobody's out there, I don't know if it helps to turn off the outdoor ones, but
Okay.
I don't know if it helps. You think that's it? Okay. Yeah, I hate, now I feel like I'm in the room downstairs. We went through a period of time, well, we were trying to get our state employees at least, sit back, a little bit competitive with the market. And the argument years ago was that so many of them were classified. You had protections, you had good insurance. You know, this was my argument. You know, you should never be at the market, but you should not be too far behind. So we did a Hayes study, and we started bringing some of those positions up. And then we hit the recession, and that all ended. And I think we completed maybe 3 phases out of the 5. So for 10 years, our employees did not get a pay raise. And during that time, their health insurance escalated, because what was happening was the negotiations that was occurring was increasing co-pays, increasing deductibles, and that negotiation with the insurance companies to where we could capture that savings and put it in the SGF to balance our budget. I believe it was 2017, we started our effort of trying to give our state employees some kind of a pay raise. It was awkward for the first 2 years. We tried to deal with classified and unclassified differently. And then by the 3rd year, I think we finally had it adjusted. And then COVID hit, and so there was no pay raise last year. And I just believe that our state employees who have been here every day during COVID, during the dangers of COVID, during the uncertainty of COVID, our employees showed up to work. Some of them had the opportunity to work remotely, but those folks that are maintenance workers and that keep our capital clean, they don't have a choice to work from home. They have to show up and be here. Now, I understand we have some businesses out there that have struggled and hurt during this time, but if you look at our state general fund revenues, we are getting back on track, and we are starting to recover. And I think part of what helped some of those businesses and some of those individuals I actually know took advantage of some of these programs, but when we did Spark, we gave those businesses $178 million. And some of that was for retention and expansion, some for broadband, and some of it was for workforce support and retraining during that time. Towards the end of Spark, we gave another $128 million, and it had a variety of ways that they could access that money. They also, in addition to, received 53,755 loans were administered under the PPP in Kansas. 53,755 loans, or $5.3 billion. $5.3 billion that our businesses had the opportunity to access. That's only on round 1. As of to date, in round 2, as far as what we know, in round 2, businesses have gotten $2.2 billion, and that will grow as we receive more information. So that's a total of $7.5 billion in PPP. Many of our state employees don't have an opportunity to have a small business or be entrepreneurial because they work here, and some of them have second jobs. So don't disagree. Our business community has gone through some transitions. but they have received help. And our state employees have not received any help. And so they did not receive a raise last year. Our revenues are are healthy right now. And, you know, I know we're gonna pass a tax plan, so that will change those ending balances. But I don't wanna keep using the excuse of we just need to put it off for a better day, because right now our economy is recovering and our state employees, again, we need to make sure we treat them with respect. And part of that respect is honoring a good working wage for the work that they do here at the Capitol and across the state of Kansas. So I just wanted to point out that our small businesses have received some federal dollars and some help. And I think our state employees are in a different situation because they're in a different category. So I wanted to be able to share that because we didn't get to continue that conversation. Thank you.
Sorry. Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't disagree that some state employees are probably below market rates on their positions, but to anchor the going rate for each position across the state in some arbitrary time in the past and then to simply increase them over time doesn't address problems that we see in certain areas across the state and certain job types that have higher demand than they may have in the past, where we may need to target raises to address recruitment and retention issues. As far as the 10-year issue goes, over the past 10 years, Kansas household income is flat. So it doesn't necessarily make sense that state employees should receive raises when no one else is. Kansas real median household income basically hit its high in 2008 and has been stagnant ever since with several dips. So I don't see how across the board raises necessarily shows respect for employees when there are areas where we are hurting for employees, where we need to increase pay to recruit and retain those employees in those areas. I would prefer to take that approach over a across the board approach. It's similar to what we did with cuts to government agencies. We had an opportunity to cut every government agency by a couple percentage points. And we said that that is taking a shotgun approach when we should be talking about each agency individually. This is similar. We're taking a shotgun approach to raises when there isn't really the justification for it in the private sector. People are absolutely hurting. I mentioned this yesterday. A lot of folks got to stay at home while we subject the private sector's employees to the Department of Labor. We have put them through what I would describe as a sort of hell with the Department of Labor while state employees remain whole. And I just don't think with all of this that we are going through that we should hold state employees above those in the private sector who have been hurting across the board. If we want to target raises to address real problems in state government where we have positions that are difficult to fill, I'm all for that. But the 2.5 across the board, I just don't believe it's justified at this time. In fact, I don't necessarily know that I would disagree based upon whatever the economy looked like, as long as household income across the state remains flat like it has. Other people aren't receiving these raises. People in the private sector aren't receiving these raises. But somehow we take everyone's tax money from that private sector, we draw it in, we say we're having a great year while they're all struggling to pay their bills, and we hand out this money like we're printing it. I personally think it should be returned to those taxpayers who have been struggling through this, the government shutdowns, the shutdowns of businesses, the limiting of businesses to be able to engage in business over this time. I think those dollars should be returned to those folks so that they aren't struggling like they have been. But That's just one opinion. I'm happy to share it, and I appreciate you listening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will echo some of the senator from Saline's comments. I think it's important when we talk about revenue. When we talk about revenue, that sounds like a really great thing, and it is, but let's remember where we get that revenue. We get that revenue from taxing individuals and businesses and from fees. The government doesn't produce anything to earn that revenue. It is produced by the citizens and the businesses here in Kansas. So then we turn around and say, well, gee, we're helping you by taking your money through taxes, and we are a very high tax state. And then we're going to give you loans and government programs when I would think most people would just be happy if we just didn't take so much of their taxes to have increased revenue. I kind of take issue with the comment that the business community has gone through transitions. The business community was shut down, and many of those small businesses will never come back. I appreciate the hard work of our government employees, but to do what has been done to the businesses and the employees and employers who do generate and produce in the state and give a statewide increase to all employees. My son works for the post office. My daughter's a nurse. My daughter was literally on the front line doing COVID tests. She did it because it's part of her job. She didn't get any additional compensation. That's fine. She didn't ask for any. It's part of her job, and it's appreciated. And we do respect those workers, as we do all of the workers who were working during COVID. And I agree. I think it's pretty bad when I get hundreds of emails every week with the debacle of unemployment. People are losing their houses and can't work and don't know what to do and have children to take care of. To turn around and give those employees who have been held harmless a raise, I think, is in poor taste. I think the timing is wrong. I'm not opposed to looking at it down the road, but I just think now is just a poor time to be considering that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate being able to talk about this. I'm not going to talk very long. I see the, at least the proposal for the 2.5% as a modest raise when we look at what we've been up against. And I think other people have talked about what our state employees have been up against with COVID. And the fact that we really never recovered since the last recession. I was part of the State Employee Pay Committee, Joint Committee 1 in the House, and back during my days in the House. I think the Hay study is something we need to look at again in terms of looking at getting our employees up close to market rate. We made some good progress, and then the recession hit in 2008. I think this is a chance for us to let our state employees know that we appreciate and care about them. We've had several other agencies talk to us, from the banking commissioner to bids. I remember in transportation, we talked about a complete turnover in KDOT in terms of those state employees that run the snow plows and essentially provide for us safety during those kinds of disasters. We've had to make adjustments and corrections. So I think this is a way for us to keep pace with that. I don't disagree with us looking at a new market study and being able to make more precise adjustments in pay, but I don't think we can pull that off now. And I think right now is the time that we let our state employees know that We do care about them. Our consensus revenue estimates at least give us some breathing room to do some things that we've looked at, several different items in our budget. But state government doesn't really work or run very well at all, if at all, if we don't take care of the employees who provide those services. So I'm going to be supporting that, what I think is a modest raise for our employees. And I hope we can find ways to help the other agencies that have tried to make some adjustments that we've heard the last day and a half in terms of their needs also. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Solentrum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to remind the committee that persons at numerous levels of income, from those at the lowest on up through mid-level income for singles, marriage, or filing jointly, and those with children, have received numerous payments through various funding programs that have been put in place here over the last less than 12 months. So I don't believe that those persons have been without any help. I think they've received numerous payments directly from the federal government. And if you take some of those sides of payments, I think they would show that they're probably at least a 10% increase in their base salary. They're ranging thousands of dollars per person through the total program. So I just want to make sure that we all understand that I don't think there's hardly anyone except for upper income people that have not gotten help. So everybody's received assistance. Thank you.
Senator Kirshen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank everybody for the comments that were made. I think everybody's made a valid point on what needs to be done, whether it's a raise or a pay increase. I think we're overlooking one thing that might be right in front of us. If we get a tax bill through that gives a refund, and we have a property tax bill that puts a lid on increases, that might be the best pay raise we could do this year, but it'd be a good one. So I think that's something we have already going on, that we can say, hey, we're going to support our public employees with a tax increase. I'm not tax increase. No.
Senator McGinn.
Sorry, I don't have the tax bill in front of me. So does that mean W-2 wage earners, is that in that bill? The W-2 wage earners are gonna get a tax decrease? Okay, so it won't impact them, but just a couple more comments. You know, you mentioned KDOL. This has been very painful for all of us in trying to take care of our constituents. There's been a lot of frustration for a long time. And so I don't know what's going on now, why we haven't gotten through some of the big waves yet. But the comment was made that they've been going through hell, and don't doubt it. But the other side of that is they're going through hell because this legislative body hasn't funded modernization for 30 years. So as the legislature has not funded Department of Labor, and we have an antiquated system. So we're working on that. We're trying to move that forward. You know, it almost seems like we could be through this if we pulled out pencil and paper to where we are to date. And then as far as taxing individuals, you know, the thing about that is we also we do that because we, as constituents of this state, expect those services that we value the most. And we just went through this, took us almost a whole day. And some of the stuff that's in this and some of the stuff that was in the budget, those were priorities that we put in there as a legislature. And that's what our tax dollars pay for, are those things that we value. So, you know, I don't want to tax individuals any more than we need to at all. I've supported our tax cut bill, and I'm anxious to take a look at that again, because I know we will. But I almost thought I heard, and, you know, keep in mind, 10 years ago, we had a lot more classified workers, and now we have unclassified. And the way they've been dealing with that is, I believe the classified generally get the 2.5. Not very many left, or maybe half. And that's only in the Department of Administration. If you look at all the others, a lot of them are already on unclassified status. And they kind of tend to pool those monies. We talked about the banking situation in here through their fees, and that's what they want to do. They like that being unclassified. They like the merit part. I think we all like merit. But we'll see where this goes next week, and I appreciate the chairman letting us talk about this a little bit. But if the pay raises don't go through, I'd be happy to suggest that we re-implement the Hayes study. And it was called the Hayes study then. It may be a different, of course it'll be a different vendor now and a new RFP. So, you know, I think about our computer, our IT department. I've seen a lot of people come and go, and I know it's because we don't pay them very well. And I think it would be worth taking a look at those areas that we need to pay those individuals, because those individuals, the work that they do every day, they're helping our constituents. And that's what matters. That's why we're here. So again, Mr. Chairman, thank you for letting us have this conversation, and I look forward to next week when we do it again. Thank you.
Any other comments? Senator Fagg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to echo what senators from Saline and Sedgwick said on some of their comments. First of all, I'd like to thank all the state employees. We do appreciate you. Those type of jobs are normally secure employment. And as I look around my district, 2.5% I don't think you're seeing. And so in today's world, the thing that really sticks on my mind was what was said yesterday about being cautiously optimistic. And I think we're in a period of time you can't give a raise and take it back. And we have done a job in the Senate trying to work on our capers, which has a $6 billion shortfall that we've been working to address. When you compare our state to other states, our taxes are high. And we have to be very careful that we don't send a message out to people that make good wages that they can afford to move somewhere else not to pay taxes. Then who do we have left to pay taxes here? So as I look at this type of thing, I think the House was recommending a 2% reduction. The governor was 2.5%. And, you know, I'm leaning towards in the middle at 0. So that's just kind of where my thoughts are at this point. Thank you.
Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think a lot of things have been said. I'm just going to add one more thing, and that's we forget that we have an echo. This mic has liked me all session. I'm just going to add one thing, and that's that I think we sometimes tend to forget, maybe this mic doesn't like me either, our state employees are our constituents. And so, you know, we're not talking about someone who's driving across the state line and coming back here to live or do their work. Our state employees are our constituents. They live here, they work here, and they raise their families here. And so they're part of our communities, a big part, and depending on where you live in the state, more so than in some other places. But so benefiting our state employees who provide the services that are
Thought maybe that'd help. Are there any additional comments? Seeing none. Committee, I think we're going to take about a 10-minute break here real quick, and then we'll come back and we'll do the GBAs. Call our meeting back to order. Okay, committee, we're going to start going over the GBAs. And the first item we have is the Department of Agriculture. And if anyone wants or has any questions, I can have Victoria come up. Are there any questions on GBA 1? Or it's actually GBA 3, item 15, page 10, establishment of an animal facility inspector division, omnibus memo on page 1.
Mr. Chairman, mine says Department of Aging and Human Services caseloads. I'm on the sheet we went off of yesterday.
Okay. So,
This is the one I think they are looking at, is the one
okay.
that he
Yeah,
really.
I've got that.
So this is
I don't know what sheet they're looking at.
Okay, committee, it's the white sheet, April 26th, Office of the Governor. So if you go to page 1, page 2, Human Service caseloads.
This is just the adjustment because of the consensus revenue estimates, correct?
Correct.
I say adopt.
Should we do with motions or just? I mean, I think that'd be fine. Without objection, or do we want to do motion in seconds?
Got those numbers on the front.
You want to do a motion? Okay, let's go ahead and do motions in
In
seconds.
case we get split.
Sure.
I'll make a motion to approve the human caseload, service caseload.
We have a motion, a second by Senator Hawk. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, on page 3, message on the lottery and gaming revenues.
Can somebody just kind of tell us exactly, without sitting here reading all of it again, could
Right.
Amy or somebody just give us a quick briefing? Thank you. You don't have to read it all, just give us the highlights.
Gabrielle, thank you.
Sure. So in fiscal year 21, we're still having some echo problems, I see.
Don't turn it off.
Are there any questions for Gabrielle?
I'll make a motion, we accept the recommendations with the addition of the language.
We're going to try something. I shut that off. Okay. So we have a motion by Senator Petty. Do we have a second?
I said with the addition of the language.
No, I meant with the financing part.
Well,
These are adjustments.
we have a decrease of 700,000. We have a savings, or 2.5 going back to the state general fund. And we have the addition of the language. So,
Let me put it this way. You're adopting the GBA number 2.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Senator Hawk? Questions? Senator Hawk? Are there any questions on the GBA number 2? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. On number 3, is that yours, Gabrielle? Please, we'll just review them all. I think it'd be the simplest. Senator Hawk. Second by Senator McGinn. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, number 4, the Insurance Department. Martin.
Yes, Chairman and Committee. So this is the Securities Act fee fund lawsuit. So there is a settlement agreement pending. Just turn it on.
Senator Solentrum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would this all be subject to the parties agreeing to the settlement? Mr. Chairman,
Senator Solentrum.
do we need to make it subject to?
Jill? Go either way, yes.
Well, I'd like to see the issue resolved and agreed to by all parties, and I think we ought to make it subject to resolution and agreement. Or am I missing something?
I think if that's your motion,
Yes, that would be my motion.
okay, we have a motion. Do you have a second? Senator McGinn seconds. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Martin. Number 5, the KBI increased telecommunications cost. Who had that one?
Mr. Chairman, Aaron Clausen, I do have that one.
Are you on WebEx, Aaron?
I am on WebEx.
We can barely hear you, Aaron.
I apologize, sir.
Okay, we got you. You want to just give just a real...
It's basically due to the KPIs requesting additional money in fiscal year 2022 from the State General Fund as the OITS Office of Information Technology Services created a new rate structure that will go into effect, and they're requesting additional expenditures for this new rate structure.
Any questions for Aaron? Senator Solentrum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are they the only agency that have received these revisions, or have other agencies received new rate structures?
If I might, Mr. Chairman, the
Yes.
GPA currently only includes this agency. The KPI is requesting money for the increased rate structure, but I'm sure since it's OITS, any agency affected by this would probably be involved.
Any other questions? What's the will of the committee? Senator Hawk. We have a motion. We have a second. Senator Petty seconds. Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Number 6, state loan repayment program.
The state loan repayment program.
Questions? Senator Petty.
I was going to use this mic.
Any other questions for Megan? And then would someone like to make a motion? Senator Hawk?
Thank you. I move we approve GBA number 6.
Motion, have a second. Senator Petty seconds. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have number 7, Children's Health Insurance Program. Megan, is that you again? Any questions for Megan? Seeing none. Senator Hawk? Motion by Senator Hawk, second. Senator Kirshen. Any discussion, questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we'll have the number 8, the Veteran Service Program. Martin? Any questions for Martin? Seeing none, would entertain a motion. Senator Hawk?
Happy to do it, Mr. Chairman. I move we approve GBA number 8, Kansas Commission on Veteran Affairs Office, Veteran Services.
Second by Senator Fagg. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we'll have number 9, transfer to special city and county highway funds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at number 9, with the passage of House Resolution 133, the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Act, there is an additional transfer of $12.5 million being requested by the governor from the State Highway Fund to the Special City and County Highway Fund to help restore losses in motor fuels taxes during the corona pandemic. Due to the nature of this being an off-cycle pandemic, there will be additional language to be added, but essentially the amount that to be distributed would be $12.5 million.
Questions for Aaron? Senator Sondrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering if the committee saw the distribution of this fund to the city and county highway funds, who's getting how much, what the calculations are. Have we seen any detail on that at all?
No, we haven't. Aaron, do you have anything on that?
I can definitely work together to get that detail given to you. I believe it's calculated under the state treasurer's office, but I will get some back to you.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that we put this one off till we meet next week so that we can get more detail on how this is going to be dispersed to the various cities and counties and what their actual, some of their actual losses have been, so we can make a better decision.
Is the committee okay? I think we'll just push this off till next week when we can get the list. Senator Clays.
Yeah, we passed Senate Bill 133, which made some changes to the Eisenhower program. And during that discussion, we did find that this dollar amount, or roughly this dollar amount, was said to make the fund whole based upon those losses. So I think you'll find that it does come back, that it does make them whole. But if you want to know the calculations and such, that's a separate issue. So I'm fine with waiting. I just wanted to add that. We did have that discussion with KDOT through that process when we were working on SB 133. I don't know if that's what it passed as when it went through the Senate, but that was the original bill.
Senator McGinn.
My guess is there's a formula of how they distribute this, so.
So are we all okay in waiting until next week and seeing the distribution? Okay, we'll pass on that till next week. Next, we'll have item number 10.
I also have item number 10. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item number 10 is in the governor's original budget recommendation. She did recommend the additional expenditure of a fund balance of $10,094 in 2021. This language was decided to have to be added to make this off-cycle payment to go through the system for county equalization adjustment payments.
Questions for Aaron? Seeing none, ascertain a motion. Senator Fagg? Have a motion. Do we have a second? Second by Senator Clays. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item we have is number 11, energy bills related to February's cold weather event.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also have this item, Aaron Clausen, Legislative Research. Just to let you know, this is one of 2 or 3 items you will see in relation to this, but during the February cold weather event, the agencies were allowed to request additional funding for expenditures that exceeded the normal requests. And the agency is requesting $44,835 in 2021 from the agency's Highway Patrol Operations Fund, which, as you know, is part of a transfer from the State Highway Fund.
Senator McGinn.
I think I requested information yesterday on this, and I'm trying to remember the information I requested. Oh, it had to do with the suppliers. What is our policy? Do some of them, are they on the third-party system because they have to be from where their location is? Or why aren't they on a regulated system? Because we've got another one coming up too. I'd just like to know, we have another one. We have 3 coming up at least. So, Aaron, I can't remember if we asked that question of you or if somebody else was in here earlier. Who presented
I could
the
definitely,
check?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I could definitely see what we can find from the agencies as to further detail about this request, but I'll see what I can get.
I think it was Adam Prophet. And I don't know, is there anybody here from the governor's office today?
Senator Clays.
Oh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my understanding that natural gas isn't regulated in the state of Kansas, but I may be wrong, but Kansas gas service, when they send you a bill, they're charging you for the service, and they're just simply passing on the cost of the gas itself to the end user. They don't mark it up, so there's, I don't think that those are regulated.
I think we have 2 that are regulated.
But Kansas
Somebody
gas
can
service
correct
isn't.
me.
So I was just referring to Troop C's in Salina, and that's the provider there, so that would explain that.
Who is?
Kansas Gas Service.
Well, I'd sure like to know the answer to that question.
We could push this off till next week too then.
Or maybe somebody will come answer the question before we adjourn.
Okay. We'll pass over that one, and if we get information, we'll work on today. If not, we'll do it next week.
Can somebody notify the governor's office that we have a question? Thank you.
Okay, number 12, Department of Corrections, is that you also, Aaron?
No, Mr. Chairman, this would be Merle Riedel.
Okay, Amy's going to take this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Similar to the last item, it's related to the February cold weather event concerning energy bills. So the GBA is for the addition of $1.3 million, all from the State General Fund.
Questions for Amy? Seeing none, entertain a motion. Senator Petty? Oh, so this is what, okay, so this is one of the three you want to leave until, okay. Let's get the answer. Right. Okay, we'll pass on that for now. And then the third one? 14, okay, we'll pass on that one also. Okay. Okay. 17, and then 17, we'll pass on that one until we get more information. Okay, so we'll move on to number 13, the funeral home inspector. Senator McGinn.
Are they a self-funded fee agency? Yes, they are. So it's just going to come out their fees? Yes. Okay. Thanks.
Your name, please. Sailor. Okay. Oh, no, I apologize. Okay, any other questions for Sailor? I have a motion by Senator McGinn, second by Senator Hawk. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we're going to skip 14. Okay, we'll move on. We're on number 15. Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to pass over this one. This is the establishment of an animal facility inspection division. And we heard yesterday that the governor is not really excited about items that have not been fully vetted and gone through the process. She made the argument in her line item vetoes, and I would hate to disappoint her by having an item in here that had not been fully vetted. So I would like this one to not be approved and for us to instead potentially review this next year through the regular process of vetting such an item. So I would move that we not approve GBA 15.
Second by Senator Sallentrump. Any questions or discussion? Senator Kirshen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, you can use it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to add that current pet animal bill that we have in place right now took 5 years to get all sort through all the entanglements and who was going to be doing what. And this, we now have an investigative inspector. I don't know what they do. I know we have inspectors already hired, so there's a lot of question marks in there. And then the Pet Animal Advisory Board hasn't weighed in to support this either. So based on the number of people that are interested in this, it needs to be have a bill that we can all say that's a product that we can be proud of. So I would support the amendment.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor of not approving this? Aye. Those that oppose? No? You want to be recorded, Senator Hawk? No. Okay. Okay, we'll move on to number 16, and we're going to pass over this till next week, waiting on some additional information on 16. And 17, we're passing on that. So unless we want to wait for information on these utility bills, we'll do those that we passed next week.
I have a few items that I can fill time with.
You bet. Go ahead, Senator McGinn.
First off, if the pay increase adjustments do come back, I would just like staff to so note that the KBI was left out, and this could have been due to what happened a few years ago. The KBI came and figured out a way to increase some wages for their employees, and so we had said accept them. So it could have, they could have gotten lost in that turmoil. So all I want is a notation that we do not miss out on having that discussion for them to be included if we should move forward. Another item I have is our committee had a couple of subcommittees. When we were doing the social services budget, we came across the child support enforcement issue and decided we just could not do that rather quickly. And so we had 2 subcommittee meetings, I believe, on that topic. There is a lot of problem, it appears, in those that receive the information and process and the agency that pays the bills. And there are individuals that I have visited with that still have not been paid, and it's been 2 years later. It's very convoluted, and I didn't bring my notes. You've got this certain category that if they're on any federal subsidies, they're in a certain category. If they go through the courts and eventually someone doesn't pay, they get thrown into another category. And so what is happening is, I believe, you have the system of the people that you process and begin the payment system, and then you have the agency that is supposed to pay out. And what we've seen in post audits and other things, they're pointing their finger at each other, and we're just not getting to where we need to be, which ultimately is getting single parents or paid getting that money to help their children. So I would like to request that it goes to LCC for approval, that we have an interim on child support enforcement, because it's just not something we're going to be able to solve in 2 days. I think it's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take our partners from the other chamber to weave through that.
Is that a motion?
It is.
We have a motion, a second by Senator Clays. Discussion on the child support enforcement. Senator Petty.
Could we just modify that to say child support enforcement and collection?
And collection, thank you. I knew it was just kind of like a little cliff there. I knew there was something else.
Great addition.
Thank you.
That's okay with the second? Okay. So, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Senator McGinn.
Thank you. I have another item. As many of you are aware, Council of State Governments Midwest Legislative Conference will be coming to Wichita, Kansas next year. Since their existence for over 70 years, they've never been to Wichita, Kansas. So we're pretty excited about that. And this year it'll be at South Dakota at Rapid City, and hope that we can get a lot of colleagues to go there, because we as a state will welcome, on state night, we will welcome people to go and encourage them to go to Wichita. So I hope we have a lot of participants there as well. I just had some training. I will be the chair next year, and learned a great deal about the process of how we raise money. And generally, they have always been self-supporting. We raise those dollars. We have year after year supporters of the organization who just support it. And then we have locals that help support wherever it is across the north central part of the states. And what we did in 2009, we put in $25,000 in the event there was some shortfall or a problem. In 2009, the money was put in and removed because there was not a problem. It's called first or last money in and first money out. And so it's all it is just a little insurance padding in the event that we have any kind of issues. Other states have done this. And so I would like to make a motion to put the $25,000 in for the CSG Midwest Conference in Wichita, Kansas. And again, I've talked to CSG about this. They treat all those dollars, last money in, first money out. Did not need to use this in 2009. I don't anticipate we'll be using it again.
I have a motion by Senator McGinnis, second by Senator Clays. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Oh, sorry, Senator Fack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that conference coming to Kansas, wouldn't that be a Department of Commerce type of thing for maybe getting some money from them? They probably have a budget that'd cover something like that, wouldn't they? Just a thought. I mean, they're out promoting stuff all the time, trying to get it to Kansas, and I would think this would be a perfect thing to fit into that.
Senator McGinnis.
I think that dollars that you are speaking of, those are generally used for bringing businesses in. They have the job, JT, God, you're making me think of they have a category, but those are job creation fund, that they have that flexibility. But it's for bringing businesses to town. So again, the money is only there to show that the state of Kansas, in the event there is a problem, we're there to support, but it generally is not used. And I don't know, to answer your question specifically, I don't know if they have a category like that.
Okay. Other questions? Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize if you share this information, Senator. Do we have any ballpark, the estimated economic impact of having that conference here in Kansas, in Wichita?
I didn't bring those papers with me, but what the conference will bring is between 500 to 600 people to Wichita, Kansas. So I assume there will be an economic impact. They're staying at the Hyatt Hotel. They'll be using our convention center. All of that has already been booked. There'll be overflow. Some people will be staying in other hotels as well. We will have, I believe, 3 evening events. So we will be going to places like Botanica Garden and other areas. So again, we have a lot of sponsors that help pay for all of those programs. I'm not with the CVB, or I cannot give you that economic impact, but I could sure look it up and see if they have some numbers for other cities that they have gone to.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I might mention too, I've been to CSG a number of times, and I've been to Halleck, and I've been in CSL. I've been to all of them, and they do bring in a lot of revenue. I mean, it's quite an event that people come maybe early and go to a ball game, and they may stay a day or two afterward, and so it is a good economic.
Mr. Chair, if you don't know, we have a brand spanking new ballpark that we would be happy to show off to them. So thank you.
And it's generally a 5-day event, so it's not just them coming in for 2 or 3 days. It's about a 5-day event. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Senator Petty?
I just, I think we shouldn't overlook the fact that we also
That Yes, congratulations, Senator McGinn. That's a great honor. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Did you have any others? Okay. Senator Saltram.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over the last several months, we've had joint building committee discussions on renovation and upgrade of docking. And towards the end of those meetings, we came to conclusion on what we think would best fit in that building. And so there will be some provisos that will be created that we'll need to discuss at the meeting next week. I just wanted to update members of the committee to tell you that that will be coming. So we'll work with our revisers to address those votes and what we feel like is the build out and completion of that building in its best use. So just again, FYI.
Thank you. Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, if I don't squeal. I'd like us to look, when we look at the February cold weather event and the impact on state agencies, I happened to get information on what the impact was on our Regents universities, and that bill is about $10.3 million in terms of just that week's impact in terms of their natural gas. And following up on what Senator Clays was sharing, at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the 8 bills that came in, the distribution company was Kansas Gas Service. The other one was Black Hills Energy, but they all had different actual natural gas providers. Some of those were Blue Mark Energy, Constellation, Midwest Gas, Symmetry. So it's a problem that isn't just in the GBAs that we saw this week. It's a problem that affected our Regents universities too. So if we look at that, I'd certainly like us to get that information from the Regents for all of us and see if there's anything we need to do relative to that also. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Senator McGinn.
Just to update, it's my understanding Adam Prophet is, before the House right now. They can't get away. So maybe it would be better if we put that off so we can really get some of that information.
I think that we'll just pass on that till next week. So any other discussion? I think with that, Amy, so next week we'll plan on having a meeting. I don't know, when we get here, we'll figure it out. Okay? Any other questions? Seeing none, we are adjourned.